Hi, I'm James Gardner, host of Your History, Your Story, a podcast for anyone who loves hearing fascinating tales about remarkable people, intriguing topics, and significant historical events. Our hope is to inspire you to uncover and share your history and your story. In this episode of Your History, Your Story, we are honored to have as our guest my friend and former colleague, Patrick Walsh. Pat is not only an author, but also a prostate cancer survivor who has turned his personal journey into a mission of hope and advocacy. In our conversation, Pat will share what it was like to first hear his diagnosis, the emotions of denial, the challenges of surgery and recovery, and how he came to write his book, Still Smiling, a conversation with a prostate cancer survivor. We'll also talk about the importance of early detection, support systems, and addressing the psychological impact of the disease. Since writing his book, Pat experienced a recurrence of prostate cancer and will share how he faced that difficult news and subsequent treatments with focus, determination, and hope. I'd now like to welcome Pat Walsh to our show. Welcome, Pat.
How are you, James? Good to see you.
Well, it's very good to see you, Pat. For our listeners, Pat and I met almost 30 years ago. We worked together. We not only had a great business relationship, but what my recollection is that you made being at work a lot of fun because not only were you somebody who wanted to get the job done right, but you're also a big history buff. I would say you're more than that. You're an historian because you've read so widely. But we used to have a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and I don't know. Do you remember it the same way I do?
I do, James, and I remember that when I left the workforce, I tried to get in touch with people who I had worked with, who I felt a connection to, and for years I could not find you. I checked all different places, and I can't remember finally. One day I saw James Gardner, and I was like, "Let me try this." And I think it was through Facebook, and we actually connected. And we've had a nice relationship since then. We've continued a nice relationship. But I remember it was one of those things I couldn't find you, couldn't find where you were. I knew where you lived, the area you lived in, but it was just having difficulty. And then when I did find you, yeah, a nice relationship has developed from it.
Yeah, actually, I was in jail for 10 years, so that's why you couldn't find me.
Well, I was probably in the next cell, James, so it's okay. We did okay.
Yeah, obviously, we're just kidding on that. But yeah, I was thrilled to be able to connect with you again. And you've been so kind to have been listening to our podcast. And you, along with a few other friends of ours, have given me a lot of great feedback, which is so helpful because you're very widely read. And a lot of the topics you've commented on are topics that you've researched yourself. And so Kelly and I appreciate that feedback from you.
Thank you, James. I keep in touch with you on a regular basis on my walks. I listen to the podcast when I'm walking, and I always find it real interesting. And sometimes, even before I go back in the house, I finish my walk, but I haven't finished the podcast, so I sit out on the deck and finish it because it's so interesting. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. So when we caught up with each other and during one of our conversations, it turns out that not only did we work together, that we both love history, but we share something else in common that we both had experience and have experience with prostate cancer.
Yep.
Yeah, and yours, everybody's got their own story with prostate cancer, and it's something that everybody has some experience that they had that's unique to themselves, but there's a lot of commonality in the experiences too. So, could you just start off, Pat? Oh, first of all, I want to back up a little bit. What was so nice about reconnecting was not only just the talking about the podcast, but that you've been so active in making men aware of prostate cancer, the risk of getting it, what do you do if it does enter your life? And you've been a big advocate to the point where you actually wrote a book, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But
Yeah.
for those who may not know about it, could you tell us a little bit about what is the prostate and what is prostate cancer?
Sure. And again, before I even start, James, when I wrote the book and when I meet with people, I always try to tell them that this is what it's like this is my view as a prostate cancer survivor. I'm not a doctor. I don't have medical training. Anything I say should be focused on what it's like to have prostate cancer from a prostate cancer patient point of view. But the most important thing is you should find a urologist, a surgeon, a radiologist, someone you trust, someone you believe in, someone you can work with. And what I say is what it's like when I found those people. It's from a patient point of view. Certainly, there's no medical advice here. It's just my thoughts on what it was like to have prostate cancer, and my thoughts from meeting with quite a lot of men about what they think. So yeah, let's start out. It's sort of, I think it's important to recognize one. I didn't know what the prostate was when I was diagnosed with it, but the prostate is a small walnut-shaped gland. This is sort of interesting. There's two different descriptors that people use for the prostate. Very different, but you'll find out later why it's that way. One is for scale of shape. It's a walnut-shaped gland, but also people will call it's shaped like a donut. If you look at it in a cross section, it's roundish and it has a hole in the middle like a donut. Okay, and that hole is where your urethra, which carries your urine out of your body, goes through. So the prostate's a small walnut-shaped gland. It's a part of the male reproductive system. That's why when we talk about prostate cancer, it's a male-related disease. It's in the male reproductive system. It's located below the bladder, and it's in front of the rectum. The prostate, it produces fluid to nourish and protect sperm. It produces semen and helps control urinary flow. So pretty important organ there, or gland.
Yes. So that describes what this organ is and what its role is. So when you do contract or you get prostate cancer, what actually happens?
Oh, okay. And this is real important. If there's any reason that I'm here talking to you today, or why I wrote the book, or why I spend so much time talking to different people, is my goal is to raise awareness about prostate cancer in terms of both detection and treatment. Okay, so what happens is you might have tumors or cancerous growths on your prostate. Okay, and they can spread. So it's so important that men get a test on a regular basis. So you usually get a test with your physical, your annual physical. It's a blood test, very simple blood test, or it might be a digital rectal exam where the doctor or the urologist goes in and feels around your prostate to look for hard spots, which might be cancerous or just a tumor, or maybe it's just a hardening of the prostate. So you get this blood test on an annual basis, and the blood test will tell you the presence of a prostate-specific antigen, which is called PSA. I'm way ahead of my of the curve for my learning on the chemistry of it. I just know it as PSA. Okay, so this PSA is present in your blood, and there's a level of it that's I think below 4, and I don't know the exact measurement, but it's a number 4. And if it's below that and it's not increasing, well, then you wait till next year and you get another test. If the level is above 4, or if when the urologist or your internist feels your prostate, he feels some abnormality, they might say, you know what, we're concerned, and we'd like you to go through a biopsy. And what the biopsy would mean is they go in and they take samples of your prostate with a needle. They go in, I believe, through your rectum. They go in and they take, on average, I think it's about 12 samples. They take those samples out, they give them to a pathologist, and the pathologist comes back and says, if you're lucky, well, there's no cancer. If you're It could be a case where you have a little bit, could be a case you have a lot. There's a lot of different measurements. They call them Gleason scores and whatnot. I wouldn't want to get into it because I'm not that good at it. That's why you need to see a doctor. But if it's present, then the doctor's going to say to you, we should talk about you having cancer. But the sort of the insidious thing about prostate cancer is sometimes you have no symptoms at all. So you might be urinating on a regular basis. You don't get up in the middle of the night. You have no side effects at all. And that was my case. I had no side effects whatsoever. I slept through the night. I had absolutely no issues at all. But when I went through the tests, I found out that I did have prostate cancer.
Yeah, and I went through a similar situation. I had been getting that PSA test done for a while, and Actually, I also think that sometimes that number four is used, I guess, as a standard, but I think sometimes it depends on your age. And as you mentioned, I think if there's any changes where it's been going up, even if it's below that number. So again, that's a little tricky, and the doctors would be able to explain that better. But I know mine started to go up,
Yep.
and it wasn't like it was through the ceiling, but it was going up. And then they thought, oh, it can be affected. The number can be affected if you have an infection or you're eating spicy food even can affect it, all those things. So they'll usually
Bicycle riding and
bicycle ride. I'm praying, oh, I hope I had
yeah,
a
yeah,
spicy burrito last night.
yeah,
Didn't,
exactly. They bicycle riding actually is a real issue. I know people who had spikes in their number, and then and one fellow in a support group I belong to in Cape May, he was a what do they call it, an instructor who did cycling. Where they get together in groups, I guess on pelotons and stuff. And he did that, and after he had treatment, and then his number spiked again, and he was devastated. And the doctor said, "Well, what have you been doing?" And he said, "Well, I did some heavy duty training and classes," and he backed off it, and his number went right down again. So bicycling is a thing. They'll ask you that on your initial consult.
Yeah, and I was thinking, oh, well, it's been 20 years since I've been on a bike, so that's not it either. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, again, the numbers started going up, and then we had to have some serious conversations about some of the treatments that you just discussed. But let's go back to your story. So, you've learned a lot since you were originally diagnosed. But
Yep.
talk about how you reacted when you first found out there could be a problem.
James, that's interesting, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to write the book. My reaction was for a good, I would say, 3, 4 years. I was in total denial. So if we went back in time from 2000, I had records. I'd been getting a physical every year, but in 2000 to 2003 was the first time I saw anything about PSA on it, and I always had a low number. And then in 2004, I think I had a 4 plus, not a high four, but a four, say 4.3. And my internist said to me, "You should see a urologist." And then he said, and he explained a little bit about prostate. I went to a urologist, and the urologist said to me, "Yep, 4.3 is a number we should be concerned about." He said, "What we'd like to do is take a biopsy." And this was in 2004 or 2005. And I said, no, I just don't want to do it. I'd rather just wait and see what happens. It's got to be a fluke. I feel too good. And inside, I think what was going on was I had a job I really loved. My family life was great. Isabel and I were traveling. We were doing a lot of good things, and I didn't want to think I had cancer. So, and I had no side effects. That was a big thing. So for the next 3 to 4 years, I kept every time I would get my exam and my blood work, it would go up. And they call that velocity. So how fast is it changing? And towards the end, my velocity, it was changing quickly. I think I went from like a 5 to a 7.4. And my urologist called me and said, this is a high number. We've got to do something about it. And I said, no, I want to wait till next year. And I did, and it came back at a 7.4 again. And he said, we have to do something. But he didn't talk to me. He left me a message on my phone. And I ignored it. I just ignored it. And I said, you know what? I'm not dealing with this. I don't have cancer. I can't have cancer. And I even, to a point, I changed urologist. So I couldn't face this guy. So I changed urologist. And I told my wife, well, I'm going to change because they don't take our insurance anymore. And they didn't. They'd switched from Blue Cross to another. And she's like, well, we've got to go to see someone. And I put it off another year. And in 2010, I went to a new urologist. He took the blood work, and it was 7 something. And he called me on a Sat Friday, and he said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to wait. I want to do some watchful waiting, it was called back then. And now this was 3, 4 years of watchful waiting. And he said, okay. And he said, we'll do that. He said, I just put it on my form that you want to do that. And he said, I just have one thing I want to tell you. And I said, what's that? And he said, Mr. Walsh, you have cancer, but you won't let me prove it to you. He said, why don't you call me back on Monday? And he hung up the phone. So Monday, I called back and I scheduled a biopsy, and I had a biopsy, and I had cancer. I mean, and that was it. And everything changed from that point on. But I was just in denial. And people say to me, well, you worked in a medical device field. How could you do that? And I think it was, I didn't want cancer, and I felt too good. I certainly I was a little overweight back then, maybe a little more than I am now. But I just didn't want to deal with it. It just wasn't something I wanted to deal with. And I was in denial. And it was because when I did read, I heard about all that could happen with prostate cancer. I heard that it was the second leading cause of death among men from cancer. And I heard all these things, and I just said, I'm not gonna deal with it. I don't have it. So it was less than watchful waiting, it was wishful waiting. And I didn't even know what I was waiting for, other than I knew I didn't want cancer. So that's the way I handled it until I got it treated.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, you've explained to me why you delayed it, and we're kind of looking the other way and ignoring it. But because working with you, I was on project teams that you were leading, and you were somebody who attacked a problem. You attacked it quickly, so it's hard for me to think about you sort of pushing it to the side, But you, as you said, life was going too well. But when you did ignore it, did you just forget about it, or was it still in the back of your mind?
You know what, James, that's one thing I think about every once in a while, because I didn't really think about it, and I just pushed it out of my mind and said, I'm lucky. I have the job I always wanted. I'm doing meaningful work. I'm having fun. And I guess, you know what? It wasn't like I lived a life with the cancer in the shadows. I just didn't think about it. It was total denial. It was like, no, I don't have it. I'm not going to deal with it. These guys got to be wrong. And the sad part is that in my father's side of the family, prostate cancer was not an issue, but cancer was a major issue. Okay, almost all the members of his family had cancer, and most of them died from it. So it was like I thought to myself, well, okay, I'm not smoking, I'm not a heavy drinker, I'm not working in a chemical or an oil refinery. I can beat all those things. So this is probably just, it's not going to happen. So I just pushed it out, and it did. I can't say it was even in the shadows. It must have come up once in a while, but I don't remember it coming up now. Pretty good mind control.
Yeah, I'll say so. Just to compare your story, the early times to mine, when I was told by the urologist that he was suspicious, that he did an MRI and it showed something there. And then he said, we really need to do a biopsy. And I had the biopsy. And then I got a phone call. And actually, he started off with, "Hi, Mr. Gardner. How are you today?" I was like, he sounds pretty upbeat. This is going to be good. I think he had a similar story with the results. And he said, "Mr. Gardner, you have prostate cancer." And I remember this cold sweat broke out on me. And with me, just to summarize it, and of course, my wife Kelly was with me on that journey from the start, but it was kind of get it out of my body now reaction.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't matter. I mean, I wanted to get it done locally where it was less problem. We could hurry up and do it. We didn't have to drive anywhere. And, he wasn't even thinking about a second opinion or anything. All out the window, get it out now. And that's the way I did it. So I was being hasty, and you were kind of looking the other way. So, so
Yeah.
what happens here? I mean, the word cancer in my head just took over all other thoughts, and you were able
Yeah.
to sort of push that in the back. So so tell me again the process of deciding, no, we got to act on this.
Well, as soon as I got my biopsy results, I knew I had to act on it. And even before that, I guess I had been on a business trip when the doctor called, and I guess Isabel had gotten the call while I was away, and he must have told her that the results of the biopsy were, I'm sorry, that the blood work, that my PSA had gone up. So when I got home, Isabel, who had been tolerating my behavior, just said, "You know what? We've got to deal with this. Something's got to happen. You've got to deal with it." And to be honest, that was helpful. But when someone tells you you have cancer, but you won't let me prove it to you, and he's someone you respect, and I really do respect this doctor, you just say, "Okay, I guess I got to do something." Now, the interesting thing is that there are different treatments. Okay, and I didn't even consider any other treatment because the doctor told me you've got to get robotic surgery. He said, I'm 70, he was my age. So I think at the time he was 62, 63. And he said, I'm not going to be able to do surgery on you with robotically because it's new and I'm not going to learn it. My learning curve, I'm too old to get on the learning curve. So here's the people who you should talk to, but you need to have robotic surgery. So an interesting point of view is that normally I would have set out on a decision and I would have said, well, what's available? What's the best results? All this. I didn't even think about radiation. I didn't think about anything else. I thought the therapy I was going to have was surgery. And it wasn't because I was saying I want this cancer out of me. And a lot of fellows like you say that, and that's a reaction. But for me, it was the doctor told me what to do. So think of how odd that is. The doctor had been telling me what to do for about 10 years. And now that he told me I had cancer, I was listening to the doctor. There's no doubt in my mind. I had changed my tune completely.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, so you're given these options, and with us, when we got the diagnosis, and as I said, I was off to the races, and my wife slowed me down and
Hmm.
just said, "Look, we're going to get a second opinion," and the doctor we went to for the second opinion, is the one that we went with, and we ended up traveling down to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and that's where I had the robotic surgery, which was the recommended course of treatment, and we went with it. So you and I both went through the experience of robotic prostatectomy. And in your book, you talk a little bit about, first of all, let's talk about right before the surgery. And we're in that period where I don't know about you, I was biting my nails. All sorts of things were going on in my mind. We were planning a wedding for my middle daughter. My
Yeah.
older daughter had moved to Texas, so we were grieving there at the same time. But what happened with you? You got very sad. You had some ups and downs. Can you talk to that a
Oh,
bit?
sure. And James, it's something we should talk about later because um, I think it's so very important. The way I was brought up in a real working class family. World War II veterans, the whole thing about being a man. And we never talked about anybody getting psychological help or having emotional issues, and God forbid you were crying about something. Okay, so when I had that period from November of 2010 to February 2011, I was on a real up and down course. There were a couple times where I just went out on my own for rides and things that made me happy, to do things that normally would make me happy, and I'd just come home and I'd sit there and I'd cry. I thought to myself, my God, I've got cancer, and of course you have those nightmares that say, oh my God, I've got cancer, and you've always heard the story. If someone gets opened up and they find all this other cancer, and they say, oh, we're going to close you up. Just go live the rest of your life because there's not going to be much of it. All those things go through your mind. And now that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book and why I talk to people, because that's not necessarily the case. Prostate cancer, if detected early, is very curable and it's livable. You lead a very nice life. Even someone as foolish as I was, who put it off for 7 years. My surgery was in 2011, so that's 14 years ago, and I've lived a wonderful life during that period of time. A little different, but certainly wonderful. And if you saw me on the path as I'm walking or on the beach as I'm walking, you would never even know I was sick. And if you say to people, I don't say it to people, but if people talk to me about other people who have cancer and they go, "Could you imagine that? Could you imagine this?" And I keep quiet because they don't even think I have it. And our close friends who know I've had it, they talk about other people the same way because I just show no side effects from it. So it was a different experience, but the key there is I'd love to talk about a little more later. I'm sure you might want to. Is there's a mental aspect to this cancer, and it's very different than a physical. And at the beginning, I didn't think of even talking to anyone. Okay, I just kept it inside, and I stewed. I was like, I couldn't believe I had it. It was like the longest 3 months of my life. I remember they told me I would have my surgery in February, though I saw the doctor in right before Christmas. Isabel and I went to the city. Everybody was celebrating. There were Christmas parties everywhere, and the tree was up. And we stayed overnight in this beautiful hotel. And the next morning, we left this Christmassy lobby and went to this doctor's office on Madison Avenue, where he told me what he was going to do. And I dealt with it, but inside I was like churning. It was a very difficult thing, but you would have never known that anything was wrong with me. I mean, it was physically, I looked fine. Mentally, I was certainly having a hard time with it.
Yeah, a lot racing through our minds when we're given that diagnosis, and then we start thinking about the changes that are ahead. And
Mm.
even just facing surgery alone is always something that's daunting. But I remember it was about we had scheduled the surgery when we were down there, and I had my date, and I was at work in a very important meeting about a week before, and I'm sitting there, and we had to present and everything, and I started to break down crying. I was in my own head,
Yeah.
and a lot of the people at the meeting knew what was going on with me, or several of them. But I had to excuse myself and to get myself together and come back in because I was just, I can't believe this is happening, you know. And
Yeah.
so that was me. So we were kind of facing the same thing. Now, you're in your book, you really take us through the surgery and the aftermath and the healing process, and then the getting back into life process. So really, your book takes us through that in great detail. But can you give us a little Reader's Digest walk through that process?
Sure. So the surgery is pretty straightforward. I mean, you don't they put you out robotically. It's sort of interesting. If you looked at your abdomen, you'd see where your belly button is. They put a hole. They put two holes below and two holes on top. So it almost looks like the number five on a dice. Now, I'm sure that with minimally invasive surgery and how it's progressed, there's maybe even less openings. But when I had it, there were five openings, and I had it done at Mount Sinai in New York. And I woke up, and James, as you know, I'm a pretty talkative guy and I like to joke around. I woke up in the recovery room, and Isabel wasn't allowed in, I think, for the first hour, and the doctor was doing something else. So I was sitting there and a lady was next to me, and I started talking to her, and I think she thought I was like, I just came from surgery and I was talking and everything. And she was sort of saying how in pain she was. And I said, hey, you know, everything will work out. Don't worry about it. And I told her, she said, how are you? I said, I don't feel anything right now. And the surgery, I went home the next day. The first 2 weeks were tough. I think I had a catheter for 1 week. The second week I was fine. And by September, so say I had surgery in February. By September, I had all the side effects behind me. So we should talk a little bit about that. Usually they'll measure the success of a surgery. And I guess they do the same with radiation. If you've been treated, they think, well, is the cancer going to come back? That's number one. Two, are you going to be incontinent in terms of your urinary flow? And three, will you be impotent in terms of erectile dysfunction and things like that? I had none of those issues. Okay. I felt really good. By September, I think I write in the book, by September, I actually was sitting in a chair reading the Times on Sunday, watching a football game. And I said to myself, this is the first time I haven't thought about urine, and it's about 12 in the afternoon. So it wasn't that I was worried about getting up. I wasn't worried. And it was like, wow, I'm there. And that happened to me for the next till 2017. That was my life. I mean, I had no side effects. I felt great. I got stronger all the time. I got more control. Everything was going in the right direction. And I was thinking, wow, you know, I really ducked one here because I waited so long. But I had a great surgeon who went in and got the cancer, and I just felt great. So the side effects were minimal. That till September, going backwards a bit, you do deal with different things. You're wearing pads. I had a catheter for a while, all those things, but they're temporary. And the other side of it is, I know a lot of men are saying, "Oh, I'd have to do that. I'd have to do this." But when you're going through it, you're actually thankful that someone's invented these devices because it allows you to continue your life in a very, very positive way. So my recovery from the surgery was pretty doable, and I felt really good about myself, and I spent that summer enjoying myself, and by September I was like, okay, I'm done with this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you and I've talked before, but I had a bit of a setback after the surgery. I was on a catheter a lot longer than I had thought was going to be, but the hospital and doctors were tremendous in dealing with that. And we worked very closely with them, even though geographically from northern New Jersey to Baltimore was a little bit of a struggle. But Kelly and my daughter came down with us. We had to go back a couple of times, but ultimately, I forget how long it was before I was back to work, but by the time I went back to work, I was in pretty good shape, and I've been in good shape since. But it was a bit of a recovery issue with me, just my physiology, and it was a bit of a struggle. But learning to to have to talk about urine a lot and how
Too much, yeah.
you're going to go or not go. It's like when senior citizens get together, Pat. I'm sure you agree. How long are you together before you talk about colonoscopies?
Yeah, well, we have we try, we try. We learned from a good friend of ours. He has a group of guys he gets together with, and he's in his 80s, and he said we give everybody when we get together for lunch or breakfast 10 minutes. So everybody together gets a total of 10 minutes, not 10 minutes each participant. And those first 10 minutes we can talk about health, and then after 10 minutes it's over. But yeah, I mean I felt like I was back in, say, the early stages, right after February, say March, April. It was like I was being potty trained. I mean, it was like, geez, when am I going to get, how am I going to make it to the bathroom on time? And the surgery is difficult and it can be frustrating. But to give you some idea on that, James, when I was going through that, I tend to be, I hope I stay this way, I tend to be an optimist. So I was going through that, but I thought it was going to get better. And every time I saw my surgeon or spoke to him, I would tell him that. And I would say, he'd say, well, how's this going? I'd say, all right, but it's going to get better. So he approached me and he said, would you do me a favor? I get a lot of guys calling who are going to come in and have surgery, but they're terrified. They've got a lot of concerns. Would you talk to them? So what happened was I spent probably during that September time period, from February when I had the surgery to September, I guess I had phone conversations and some personal meetings with about 30 guys, okay, who just called me up. Okay, I didn't call them. It wasn't like the doctor said, call this person. He gave them my number and said, if you want to talk to Pat. So I spoke to about 30 of these guys and we talked about everything. I mean, it was always funny because the one issue that always came up was, what about the catheter? Okay, because these guys, they were worried about and I told them, the catheter is not even an issue. Why would you? Well, what happens when they take it out? What happens when it goes in? So we got past that. We got past all the issues, but I would share with them, and they would share with me what was going on in their life. And I think there was for lack of a better word, there was a synergy. We were both getting better by doing this. So what happened was, I did that for a period of time, and it's funny, James. Some of these men were doctors. Okay, they were doctors who had just been diagnosed, and some of them said to me, we know how to deal with this on a clinical basis, but this hasn't happened to me. What's it like? And I still have a good friend from this group who I just saw this summer, and we were talking, and he's a doctor, and we still talk about what it was like and all these other things. So we developed quite a relationship. So after I got better in September, and I'd been working with the doctor, I left the workforce the following January. So I had told you the reason I denied all of my issues was because I had this job I loved, and I really did. It was meaningful. It had all the right things. I got to deal with really great people. But now I was out of the job force. So I thought, what am I going to do? How do I get on with my life? I wasn't really ready to retire, but with the cancer and all the other things, I just thought, okay, what do I do? And I spent a lot of time. And then I thought, the feedback I've gotten is these conversations were good and helpful. So I thought, why don't I document these conversations that I had with these different guys over that period without mentioning names? Because it wasn't my intention when I dealt with them that I was going to write a book. I thought I'd still be in the workforce, but I thought, okay, I've got this, and I won't mention anybody's names, but I'll share things that people found helpful. And that's how I got the idea for the book. And it all fell into place because I had notes from the different meetings, and I applied myself for probably a good 8 months and wrote the book. I got an editor. They edited it with me, and then I got it published. And over the years, it still helps people. I just got last month, someone called me up and said, I just got the book for my friend. It's helping them. So it still sells. I'm not going to say I'm a best-selling author, but I think I helped people, and it helped me because I got to work with people on thinking things through that helped me as well as them. So that was the genesis of the book. It was just, hey, what do I do next? I'm feeling good. What do I do next? There's a power there, James, that I think is real important, and it's one of the reasons we should be optimistic. Right around the time I finished the book, I saw an advertisement for a prostate cancer support group. I live part of the year in Cape May County and part of the year up here in northern Jersey. And I saw it in a Cape May paper, and I went to the meeting, and there was a fellow there. His name's Don Trappler, and Don's a very giving and thoughtful soul, and he started a support group. And he knew that there were people who wanted to talk but couldn't. And I thought, wow, I did it with the book, but this guy wants people to get together. So I went, and there were 5 or 6 of us at the first meeting. And that group now can get as many as 20, 30 people at a meeting. And there's about 30 some members, and it evolves. People come and people go because some people want to get past it and don't ever want to think about it again. And others come in for discussion. And with the help of Atlantic Care down in South Jersey, we actually have guest speakers who are really good, who talk about different issues, talk about health issues. But the key is, think, I didn't want to talk to anybody about it when I was diagnosed. I put it out of my mind. And now all of a sudden I'm with a vocal group of people who are trying to help others. And I think that's one of the other reasons for optimism. There's an avenue out there for people to talk about it, whereas before men just didn't talk about it at all.
Well, I'm with you. I was just going to bring that up to you. Men talking about, emotional issues. I mean, we may be able to talk about the surgery or something like that, how we got through it and everything like that. But I don't know, maybe I'm generalizing, but men in general, I think anyway, are not as willing to start to talk about how they're feeling about things, particularly if it's something as sensitive such as erectile dysfunction, urinary continence,
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
sadness, feelings of sadness. But those are all part of the recovery process. And I just know that after I'd had my surgery, I wasn't really, I didn't clam up about it. I would talk about it with people if they asked me. But I started to notice someone would come up to me, say in church, and say, I hope this is okay, but my friend Charlie over here, he serves on a team with me. He just got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I told him that I knew somebody who had it.
Yeah,
Be willing to talk to, I'm sure you got a lot of those situations. And I said, absolutely. And I see this guy's face, and it was my face when I first
hmm,
found out.
sure.
And all of a sudden, I'm telling him about it. And all of a sudden, I see his shoulders drop a little bit, and he starts asking questions. I had a guy I used to work out at the gym with like a couple of years before, and he called me and said, I wanted to reach out to you and find out. He says, I've just been told I've got prostate cancer, and I'm really scared, and this, that, and the other. And I spoke to him. So, and then to find out that your group is growing and that, you
Yeah,
have resources. I know that there are groups. I never utilize a group. I wish I had at the time. I did have a former boss who had gone through the surgery, and I tapped into him a lot.
sure.
But he had a different sort of experience. So I have my own, but I
Yeah,
like to help people where I can, guys who are facing it. Now, first of all, your book, Still Smiling, it is a wonderful book. I wish I had this
thank you.
when I actually was going through it, but it helps me actually, like reading it now helps me because I was telling Kelly, it brought me back. And here's a good friend of mine who went through it. I wish we could have both gone through these together. We hadn't reconnected at that point, but we
Yeah.
could have. But tell me something else. Tell us about the family component as a support to you during this whole time.
Very, very, very important. And I think in the book, the most feedback I get, believe it or not, or maybe it hit you too, is when I talk about how we told our children that I had cancer. Our family is pretty diverse. They're pretty kids are, we've got three children and they all are different. One's a musician, one's an entrepreneur, one's a really heady business person who is now a mom and taking care of being a super mom, and she does that real well. And we got them all together and told them, and it was difficult. But you know what? They all rose to the occasion, and they rose to the occasion in a way that was supportive. It still is. I mean, I get tested every 6 months, and I've had a couple reoccurrences, and they're always there to support you and to help you figure it out. And I mean, and it comes in some of the most unique ways of dealing with it. I mean, they'll say things to you that you say, boy, they're pretty deep and pretty insightful. It was difficult for them. It was difficult, I believe, for Isabel because we've been married now 50 some years, and I had never been sick. I just had never been sick. I mean, I flu or a cold, but I had never had surgery, had never had anything, and then all of a sudden to have cancer, that was difficult. But without their support, in many ways. One of them in a spiritual or just knowing they're there supporting you is important, but in a practical way. When I would go to the doctors, I'd always take this, and I would tell people this: you always take your wife or your spouse or a significant other with you, because you're going to miss something that the doctor says.
Yeah.
And and I've actually, in some cases where I've got friends whose wives have passed away, I'll go with them. And I just sit there and take notes because you're going to miss something. And you might not be there as an active participant, though sometimes that's good. But if you listen and take notes, on the way home, you say something in the car, and Isabel would say, well, no, that's not exactly what he said. Or to give you a pretty simple, straightforward example, my doctor, the surgeon, said to me, don't worry about February. I know it's December. You're going to worry, but everything will be fine. It's a slow growing cancer. Nothing will happen. So and he said to Isabel, he's going to get anxious. And when he gets anxious, just calm him down and remind him that it's all going to be fine. And he gave her some stuff to say. So one day I was riding home from work, and a senator, I think he was from Washington State, a U.S. senator, was diagnosed with prostate cancer on a Saturday, and he was going to be operated on at Walter Reed on Monday. They said this on the news, right? And it was important because it was a major bill he wasn't going to miss. He was going to be able to be there and back for the vote. Well, I let out with some of the most loudest profanities ever when I was driving home in a car, and I heard this. And when I got home, I was livid. I said, this guy is a senator. He gets 2 day treatment. I'm just a regular guy, and I got to wait 2 months. And I was going on, and the kids had all left home by that time. They were living their own lives. So it was just Isabel and I. And she finally said, remember what the doctor said? She said there was going to be days like this, right? Well, this is one of those. Stop it. It's going to be fine. So you need people to help you do the support, but you also need them to remember things you don't remember that you put out of your mind. So yeah, family support was essential to me. And my kids have great sense of humor. So the day of the surgery, they were at the hospital, and it was almost like we had to almost calm them down. It was like who was going to do the most on the treadmill, and we were like, it's not a treadmill, get off that equipment. And it was distracting, and it was good. So yeah, we family is so important.
Oh yeah, Kelly was. She would always listen to what the doctor was saying, but Kelly also knows how to read me, and she could see. When I had a couple setbacks, she was like, James, you need to calm down right now.
Yeah.
She said, I could see your eyes darting. You're nervous, and sort of let me take this. She'd say,
Yeah.
and she took over a lot of discussions with my care, and I was, it wasn't like I was out of my mind, but I was. She knew
Sure.
internally I was very worried, and I felt. Oh, when you have surgery, I mean, it's still, I mean, it's a robotic surgery, but it's still major surgery. I think we have to
Yeah.
let people know that it's still,
Oh
when you
yeah.
get in there and you're messing with your body, things are going on. But, so yes, the support of my daughters, and one of my daughters had just moved, and the other daughter was getting ready to get married and move. Also, her husband was in the Air Force, and my wife was planning a wedding for my middle daughter while I was having the surgery and recovery. So I think you, in your book, you have a similar story, but it was a really important thing to have family support, and we had some wonderful friends who came alongside.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
but I wanted to just sort of go on to a next step. beyond you having written this book, you mentioned just now that I think around 2017, you had a recurrence. Tell us about that experience, because that's a whole next set of emotions, right?
James, it is, but I think it's very important to preface my two reoccurrences with there's really reason for optimism. So someone might hear this and say, well, wait a minute, you had the surgery. How did prostate cancer come back? Well, prostate cancer can be small, and it can be, some of it could be left from the surgery, some of it could have been in a lymph node, some of it could have been too small to be seen. So it's not unusual for it to come back, okay? But the reason for the optimism is that there's so many advances now that they can find things quickly and treat them. So in 2017, I had my first reoccurrence, and I had hormone therapy, where basically what they do is prostate cancer grows and feeds off of testosterone, the male growth hormone. So what they do is they basically get your testosterone to zero through hormone therapy. And then they radiate the areas that in the first instance, they call it salvage radiation. They go in the prostate bed where the prostate used to be, thinking, hey, maybe something was missed, and they radiate that. So I think I had 30 treatments of radiation and 10 or 11 months of hormone therapy. Radiation was nothing. Radiation, you have to be stoic, you have to be still. I keep my eyes closed. I would never even look at the machine. So it's sort of like a transformer. It goes around you and stuff. Everybody says to me, did you see that? Did you see this? These guys. And I go to them, I keep my eyes closed. That's how I get through it. But the hormone therapy is difficult because it just takes your body and changes you, changes your body, changes just the way you think. For me, I went from an optimist to just being a very difficult person to be around. I slept a lot. I was very weak. And these aren't unusual things to happen. But in the end, in 2017, I went through that treatment, and I came out, and my PSA numbers were now zero again, non-detectable. So that was good stuff. 2022, I had the second reoccurrence, but this time a new treatment had come out, a new therapy, and it's called PSMA. And what it does is it tracks prostate cancer cells, not prostate cancer, or not prostate cells, so prostate cancer cells. So they inject you with this tracer. It's radioactive. They inject you an hour later, they put you under a scan, and lo and behold, your body lights up where there's prostate cancer. So think about that. Now, when I had radiation the first time, they didn't know where it was, so they just did the whole prostate bed. In this case, they knew where it was specifically. It was in 3 lymph nodes. They knew how much it had absorbed of the tracer, so they knew relatively how big it was. And so they said to me, we're going to now go in and we're going to do radiation again, not in the prostate bed because they couldn't do it again in the same area. We're going to do it up by your abdomen where these lymph nodes are. And the interesting thing was, and this is one of the main reasons we should all be optimistic. The doctor said to us, I was now over at Sloan Kettering in New York, and the radiation oncologist said to me, I'd never heard this before, Mr. Walsh, I think I can cure you. And I said, okay, what does that mean? Define cure for me. And he said, you might not ever have to worry about this again. And I said, well, how can you do that? And he said, I can see it, so I can treat it. So he said, if we can see it specifically, I can radiate it. And then he said the bad news. He said, but I'd like you to go under hormone therapy again. And I was very reluctant because I just couldn't go through it again. And mentally, it just bothered me. So Isabel said to me, she was in the room, and she said, Pat, you always tell the kids, if you're going to get into something and you're really serious, you got to be all in. She said, so what do you think? And I said, okay, I'll go all in. And I did. And I had another 30 some treatments of radiation and a full year of a hormone therapy. They call it, in my case, they use Lupron. And I saw right away that I was having problems. I just wasn't in a good frame of mind. And I knew it was going to be a problem because it was the last time. And it's not something you can control. It's not tired, it's fatigued. It's like you're moving and you're doing fine, and in a matter of seconds, you have no energy. Okay, so I said, I've got to do something. And I sought the help of a psychologist at Sloan. I told him what I needed was coping skills because I didn't want to be a mean person. I didn't want to be a person fighting with people. And I knew that when I had this lupron and heart, I was cranky, I was miserable, I wasn't optimistic. How could I? And I had a plan of things I wanted to do. I was going to pull myself away from situations. I'd sleep. I'd read. I like music. I'd go for my exercise. And we talked about it. And he said, okay, let's do it. And I've been under his care for now 3 years. And I've learned coping skills. But one of the major things he's done for me, and it's helped other people too, he said to me, Pat, let's try to think of it this way. Let's put cancer in the back of the brain and let's put life in the front of the brain. So when you have these situations, let's try to do that. And we become, I consider a lot of people my friends. I don't know whether he considers me a friend or a patient, but I consider him a friend. And when we talk, he's been very helpful because one of the things about prostate cancer, and I've talked about this in the past, you can look very healthy and you can seem very healthy. Some of the effects are intimate, so you're not going to be sharing them with everybody. If you have erectile dysfunction or you have issues with incontinence, it's not something you talk about. You've got things that can help you with that, and there's new things coming on daily or very frequently. But mentally, it affects you, okay? And sometimes you're not going to share anything, but someone might say, gee, look at Pat, he looks really down or whatever. So how do you deal with that situation? And I went and did it. And I was surprised. You talk about family support. My kids were like, "Wow, that's the best thing. That's really good. I'm glad you did it." Isabel was really excited about it, and it turned out to be real good. And I think I suggest it to a lot of men now because I know they'll talk about certain things. And the one thing about Memorial Sloan, and I believe Atlanticare down in South Jersey is doing a lot of this too. They're integrating treatment. So at Sloan, I can see a dietitian, I can see a psychologist, I can see someone when if my back acts up because of the radiation. All I have to do is just contact them, and it's good because it's a support network that just makes it better. And I'm not sure that was available when I first got it. But one of the key things, and I'll say it again because I believe it's so important, is they talked to me the first time about being cured. And cured means there's hope. Okay, these other treatments, you just pray that you're going to beat it so that it doesn't reoccur. Having hope and knowing that there's a chance you might not deal with this again, and maybe I will. I don't know that, but at least I have the hope. And I've heard other doctors say this. I caught a doctor at a meeting I was at, and he was talking about cure, and we was a question and answer period, and I said to him, you don't know how important it is for the group to hear someone say that because now there's hope. And he was set back a bit, and he said, well, I'm not God. I'm not here I can't cure things. And later on we talked. I said, well, I didn't think you were God. I didn't accuse you of being God. I just think that with good science, good inventions, and good gifted surgeons and oncologists, maybe we can cure. And that's a big change from when I started. So I think that's one of the reasons of being so optimistic.
Yeah, I believe that is there's so much in that what you just said. And one of the things I caught was your children seeing you, you know, for not only for yourself, but for them, reach out for help.
Yeah. Oh, it's
I'm okay. I'm going to bite your head off every minute. I'm going to be
yeah.
disagreeable. I'm going to be ornery. You're going to see me crying, but I don't need help. You went and got help. I mean, I have no qualms saying that I once in a while I go see a therapist. I absolutely benefit from it.
Sure.
It's very important. It has been important since the prostate surgery and on many issues, not just that. And I don't think men should ever attach a stigma to help
Yeah.
therapy, talk it through, whether it be the group support groups that you talk about, family members, and also professionals.
Sure.
And you also mentioned before, of course, having a good communication and trust in your medical staff because that's priceless. But
Yeah.
I want to sort of wind down here with a couple of things. We were back in touch again when you went through the latest round
Yeah,
of treatment, went with the recurrence. And we also together, I had on our podcast, I found a gentleman who was an author. He was a presidential historian.
mm,
Interviewed him about his book on presidential friendships. His name was Mike Purdy. And you can find that back in our archive.
sure.
A tremendous historian. But then when we finished our call on the history podcast, we talked, and it turns out that he said, "Oh, it came up about prostate cancer. I don't know how, but
Mm,
that he also has encountered it." And he told me his story. And then we actually had him back again for another episode where he talked about his journey, and it was all about his faith and handling, some very difficult things. But Michael had a very advanced state of prostate cancer, and I thought of you, and I just thought you're just an empathetic person and a straight shooter and a good friend, and I introduced you. And then the three of us kind of walked together for a little while, didn't we?
yeah, yeah. Michael, I think that's real important, James, because I keep talking about being optimistic, but there's a lot of men who die from prostate cancer. So how do I justify being optimistic? Okay. Um, Obviously on a personal basis, they lost their lives, so that's real sad. Michael was a gifted historian, eloquent when he spoke, a very religious man, very giving, but yet he passed away. Well, I don't know why that happens. I know that his life was extended somewhat because of the new therapies, and I know that some of the things he was looking for, it was to be treated with, were right after the coronavirus, and there were shortages of them. But he certainly set a great example. I have another friend. I wouldn't want to use his last name, but his first name was Peter. Peter was one of the most giving people I've met. He spent his own money to buy models of the prostate. He talked to senior citizens groups. He talked to library groups. He was part of our support group, and I always saw him. He was cherubic. He looked like an angel, beautiful smile, and he was taken by prostate cancer, and I think he still lived that optimism because he tried everything before everything didn't work. So I think those people are just so special, but people live longer, some don't, but there's so many reasons to be gratified that we knew Michael and Peter and others like them, and that we learned from them. But I guess my goal would be that if we take the time and think about it and try to communicate well enough, maybe this will be a cure. Maybe there will be one of these things where, you know what, it won't be something that men are afraid of, but at least we're talking about it. And I think that could in itself get us to a good result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And Mike Purdy, as you said, he did pass away, but the three of us were able to communicate right up
Yeah.
until like a day, maybe a day before he passed. He was just a delightful human being, and he
Yeah.
impacted my life. And I urge people to go back and look at those two episodes. Uh,
Mine too. Mine
yeah,
too, certainly.
yeah,
Yeah.
he really very eloquent man. But I wanted to conclude, if I may.
Sure.
Your book is Still Smiling is the name of your book, but you talk about your optimism. Could you tell us going forward, what are your principles for living right now?
Hmm. Uh, James, you're fairly eloquent. Okay, you're pretty eloquent, much more eloquent than I am. So I don't really have principles for living. I sort of think things through as I go along. I've always been resilient. No matter what happened from when I was a kid straight through to today, I try to be resilient. I certainly never want to not be an optimist, so I'm an optimist. I try to be caring. Um, I've been trying, I guess maybe that would be the principle, the overriding principle. I've been trying for well before I had my cancer, probably since my early 30s. I've been trying to be a kinder person. okay, to be someone who can be kind to other people. And I've been lucky in that I had a lot of really good mentors at different jobs I had, or family, or friends who saw something and sort of helped me figure it out so that I would become a better person. And I do that, but I also recognize that I'm a big work in progress. So what might be kindness to me, someone might say, give me a break. This guy needs a lot more. But but I'm a work in progress. So I focus on those. I've got the love and support of my family. And if that's a principle, well, I guess that guides me. Just if I can do that, I'm in a good place. So I'll continue to be resilient and optimistic and be a work in progress.
Well, you are a good friend, and I think I'd mentioned before. I mean, you're a straight shooter. You tell it as it is, but with kindness, because you have people's best, what's best for them in your sights, and your sense of humor is contagious. Your optimism, and I remember when you were waiting on some results and things like that. I remember talking with you about it, and I'd say, Pat, how are you doing? And I know you were going through some tough times, and you said to me, I'm focused,
Yeah,
staying on you're not getting off the goal at the end and
yeah,
keeping your mind focused. But you also, during the whole process, you're also giving back to others. You're paying it forward even while you were going through difficult times. And I think it sounds to me like that's working for you because you know I was really looking forward. We've been talking about doing this interview for about 2 years now. I
yeah.
said we gotta do this because it's too important. And do you have any final advice for somebody who maybe thinks, I don't want to get tested because I don't like where you were at, sort of, or I don't want to
Sure. Yeah.
deal with it? What would you say to those people?
Well, prostate cancer, they say, I don't like to use this, but they do say it is a slow growing cancer. Maybe that's what I hid behind. That's why I don't like to say that. But it is. So you should get tested. And those testings, there's guidelines. I think the testings are something like if you have a pre-existing condition, a family member, or if you're an African American male where the incidence of prostate cancer are greater, you should probably start someplace in your 40s. But again, you talk to your internist and they'd help you out with that. If you don't have pre-existing condition, I think testing starts in your 50s. Again, you check with your internist. But if you do that, there's a good chance that one, you might not have it, and if you do have it, it's treatable. So I think we have to look at that rather than do what I did, and now I'm grateful every day. And I take responsibility for what I call my cancer. A lot of people tell me, well, it's really not your cancer. And I say, no, it is my cancer. And when I take ownership, then I act on it. And I feel good that, you know what? I had my head in the sand for 5, 6 years, and still, James, I was operated on in 2011, and here I am at 2025, and I would tell you this summer we had our whole family in for a week, and there's been a couple of years where I've been sort of tired, and everybody knows that I was with the hormone therapy, so they sort of let me do what I had to do, and I would do things. But this year, when everybody left, I said to Isabel, I miss them already. And I had such a good time because my body's bouncing back, and that's a blessing. So why would we hide from something like I did that can be cured or treated, or maybe you don't have it at all and you can have a wonderful life? And I picked the title for the book, Still Smiling, because I tend to believe smiling is really important. And to be honest with you, for the most part, I'm still smiling. So
Well, you absolutely are, and I'm just so happy we were able to connect. Of course, we
I am too.
we keep connecting, and we share old stories from work, and also from the
Yeah.
podcast, and also talking about our similar journeys. And I'm 10 years now out since my surgery, and
Congratulations. Great stuff.
thank you. Thank God, still undetectable. And but also don't jump like I did without, my wife had to slow me down. You also got to, do some homework, find out about, get that medical team you're comfortable with
Yeah.
and everything. But Pat, thanks again for being on our show. You've been a fantastic guest. And I really, if anybody has not looked up the book yet during this interview while they're listening, it's Still Smiling, A Conversation with a Prostate Cancer Survivor by Patrick Walsh. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your History, Your Story. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Instagram to stay connected. We'd love to hear from you whether you have questions, comments, or a story to share. Until next time, be well and God bless.